Well, coming up, we asked one of our time's probably most respected business author to challenge the M&M panel. And oh my, this is a tricky question. So stay with me, because we asked Daniel Goleman to challenge Max and Barry. For those of you who doesn't know Daniel, he's the author and probably one of the most iconic business books out there, The Emotional Intelligence, which, by the way, I think is written 26 years ago, a book which was featured on the New York Times bestseller as #1, and later on stayed on the list for 1.5 years with more than 5 million copies sold. Now, Daniel Goleman will, by the way, be joining us on the M&M show this fall, but let's just run the BCG moment, a minute for a moment here.
Here's my question. Let's say you really care about the environmental impacts of how you live, what you buy, what you do. Do you really believe that we have enough information, that we have transparency about those impacts to make the right choice? I don't think so.
Barry, I have a feeling of this one is straight down your alley somehow.
Well, let me just say I completely agree with Daniel Goleman. My wife and I moved to California about 5 years ago, and in California they have many propositions on the ballot. You're not just voting for candidates; you're voting for propositions. And so we were going to be conscientious voters. We spent more time researching these propositions. We spent more time filling out this ballot than we had all of the previous 50 elections we had voted in our lives. And I assure you, we were far from confident in the choices that we made. They're all complicated. There are interest groups who are trying to spin the propositions to serve whatever their interests are. It was a nightmare. And I feel the same way about environmental issues. I have no doubt that human-caused global warming is real and that we face catastrophe. And even if we stopped it tomorrow, life's going to be a lot worse for us than it previously was. I have no doubt that that's true. But when you ask me, well, what should you do, you Barry, to solve this problem? I throw up my hands. I don't know. There's an enormous amount of expertise out there. I can't educate myself. I have to depend on the good judgment and expertise of other people. And then the question is, which other people? So I think Goleman's completely right. In the complex world we live in, nobody knows enough barely to even walk across the street, let alone solve any reasonably complex problem. We make choices, hopefully with some information that we can trust, but it's always going to be partial. The sources are always going to be only partly reliable. And so to some degree, it's a crapshoot. So he's right. We need people we can trust.
So here we go, Barry. I actually thought we would have a conflict on air, and you're just in pure harmony. Listen, I want to say thank you so much for joining us on the M&M show. And Max, thank you as well. I couldn't find two more different people, yet similar people somehow. Listen, Marshall, I just have to ask you in reflection, what are you taking away from this conversation?
I think I'm taking away two dimensions. The first is the Barry dimension. That is limit choice that doesn't help. Limit noise that doesn't help. And a corporation limit that. On the other hand, don't, back to the Max's point, don't put yourself in a box. And be willing to do experiments, be willing to go outside that box and try new things, because if we're not careful, we can let artificial intelligence put us in a box that we almost never get out of. So those are my two reflections.
Yeah, I so agree with you. And I have to say one thing, that is, I love the idea about putting some randomness at work. I'm not sure I agree with Max about waking up at 3 a.m. in the morning and go to work, right? But I certainly do agree about the idea of sprinkling randomness into what you do rather than being hit by this routine. Now, I guess it's time for a mule summary. So I guess I have to bring out my iPad here and just summarize what I've learned. And I think Winston Churchill once said, I wanted to write a shorter letter, but I didn't have the time. Well, that's really the summary of this whole conversation. I think it's super complex. So here's one thing I'll take out of it. Here's what I'm learning. Routine dominates. And I think it dominates more and more in our world. So I'll put in routine on the screen here. And I'll say if you add that together with disappearance of randomness, which is really the opposite of what Max is saying, well, then I think that equals losing track of time and also purpose. Now, this is a home-created model. I'm sure a lot of people disagree, but I do think in the end of the day, we need more randomness at work. We need to disrupt ourselves. We need to have more transformation. And that, I will actually believe, is generating kind of the opposite of common sense, which I call nonsense, because common sense is fading away the less you see things from other points of view. I tend to say that the more you see the same thing from multiple points of view, the more you actually feel a sense of common sense. And that's what Barry talked about with wisdom, because I would claim that wisdom and common sense is kind of the same. Wow, that was 1 minute of mule summary here. Now, next week, we will be joined by the God. Thank you, Marshall. I was a bit nervous on this one, I have to say. Next week, we'll be joined. Thank you. We'll be joined by, I would say, Marshall, I think you agree with me, the godfather of management, Tom Peters. And then we'll also be joined by the #1 Amazon author in business. Her name is Susan David. She wrote the Emotional Agility. Let's just take a look at this video in case you just forgotten about Tom and his personality.
Every meeting that does not stir the imagination and curiosity of attendees and increase bonding and cooperation and engagement and sense of worth and motivate rapid action and enhance enthusiasm is a PLO, permanently lost opportunity.
PLO, Marshall, the icon is back. Tom Peters, even with a new book.
Poor Susan David. Good luck on getting a word in edgewise.
Yeah, me too. Here we will have the conflict on air. Anyway, thank you, Marshall. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Thanks, of course, to Barry and Max. See you next, not Tuesday, but next Thursday, the 16th of September. Bye for now.